Ma'ams and sirs, welcome to the Jarrett Bellmund Show. We are located here in our own homes due to the current situation, but my goal stays the same. It is to assist you in your personal and professional growth by talking to community leaders like our guest, Anderson Ellis. This episode is brought to you by Pro 16 Productions. Pro 16 Productions combines experience, passion, and innovation to capture the essence of your projects. Anderson grew up in Hendersonville, went to college at Wake Forest University, attended law school at the University of Mississippi. After 2 years working outside Nashville, he moved back to Hendersonville with his wife, Brittany, and joined the firm of Prince Youngblood and Massagee. Anderson has been with the Vanwinkle Law Firm since 2018, handling business work of all types: seller and buyer side transactions, operations, succession planning, business litigation, nonprofits, and homeowners associations. He has served on multiple boards, including the Henderson County Education Foundation, Kiwanis Club, Children and Family Resource Center, and the Partnership for Economic Development. He has also been the president of the Henderson County Bar Association since 2013. He lives in Hendersonville with his wife, Brittany, 2-year-old daughter, Nora, and puppy, Tipper, who they rescued from the Blue Ridge Humane Society. Welcome to the show, Anderson.
Thank you, Jared. Very glad to be here.
Yeah. Glad to. So we know each other very loosely, I guess, through maybe some networking, and really never connected one-on-one. So I'm glad to, if we can't get a cup of coffee, I guess this Zoom is now the next best thing to having coffee together.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I'm glad to be here being my home and you being in your home, considering this is the best way to meet now. But yeah, we've crossed paths a couple of times just being involved in Hendersonville and Henderson County. And I think, the family connections and everything, but glad to get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, that's great. So tell me about your puppy Tipper that you got from the Blue Ridge Humane Society. What kind of a puppy?
So I say she's a puppy. She's probably 4 at this point. She's little though. She's a little 20-pound mix of something. We're not really sure. Terrier, Schnauzer. She has an underbite, so she kind of looks like a warthog. She is the cutest, ugliest, best puppy you could imagine. But
That's wonderful.
She's everything you'd expect from a mix.
Yeah. So, how are you doing at home? You have a 2-year-old Nora at home, and how's that going? Is your wife staying home also?
No, my wife works for Party Hospital. So she is just as busy now as ever. And she works in the marketing department. So they're working a lot with the drive-through clinics and the urgent cares and all that. So she's still working. I'm still working from home. Our daughter is all over the place. So we're just figuring out how to make it work. She's talking, obviously walking, all of that. And it's wonderful to see. I'm glad that she's too young to really have a concept of what's going on. There's no fear or acknowledgement that this is different than it ever was. She just knows that mom and dad are around more.
Yeah. So that ignorance is bliss for her, where she can be. I have the opposite. I have a 16-year-old at home. And we didn't make 2 weeks before she cut her hair. So that was interesting. So she knows.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. She knows what's going on and is definitely feeling it.
Sure. Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, obviously we've all grown up and without these kind of circumstances. I can't imagine being 16 or somebody like a senior in high school and missing out on some of these things that they're missing out on and hurting. So I do think it's fortunate for people, in my position, other people's position, that have children that are too young to really know what's going on. You can kind of play it off as an extended summer vacation. And, it's more game days, more fun days of going outside, and she won't remember any of it, hopefully.
Yeah. Or we'll remember a lot of the good, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, we have you on today to, you work with a lot of small to medium-sized businesses, and I'd love to just pick your brain. You're not charging me by the hour, so I guess I get a little benefit here. But I'd really love to talk to you about, what not necessarily you could do, but anybody could do as a small business owner, medium-sized business, as far as like setting themselves up correctly, contracts, what, I guess my question would be like, if you're a small business, most of these, my listeners are probably already set up and operating, but may not have done all the right things. What would be some of those first steps you would advise somebody to take?
Sure. So, the first most fundamental step when you're setting up your business is going to be choosing the entity that you're organized under. That's sort of step number one. I've done some talks through the chamber and through other organizations where we're talking about entity formation and how you choose that. It's really individualized for what kind of business you're in, what you're doing before. But I would say particularly for anybody who's got a very beginning stages business where it's maybe them, maybe one other person working together, especially somebody who's operating as a sole proprietor where it's tied into their social security number. The first real step you want to take to mitigate the liability that your company has and that you have individually because of what the company is doing, setting it up as a corporation, an LLC, a partnership, something that provides that separation from, what you've got going on personally and what you've got going on professionally. I describe it to people in the office as, a bubble or a box. You can sort of segregate the risk, which I know I'm speaking your language now. You can segregate that risk of whatever you're doing, even if you're just, making T-shirts on Etsy and sending them out to people, or doing something with very high risk, like operating a skydiving operation. Anything you can do to make sure that if something goes wrong or you've got that exposure, it's not on, you, your family, your residence, your retirement, all the things that you've been working for all this time. You can sort of move away from that. So if something goes wrong, that's not up in the air.
Yeah, no, I have a lot of conversations about protecting assets. I find that a lot of conversations I have when we talk about mitigating those risks and protecting assets is that people, when they set up those entities, their first mindset is towards like their CPA and how taxes affect it, and not necessarily how to protect their, keep separate. I like that bubble. I think we say pierce the veil a lot. We want to protect them from an attorney coming in and piercing the veil. Not that attorneys are bad people. They have their job to do too.
Yeah. And that's a great point, because piercing the veil, for anybody who doesn't know what that, sort of term of art means, is somebody's ability to come in, even if you have an LLC set up or a corporate structure in place, to come in and say, no, they're not really operating this as a separate entity. They're operating it as sort of an extension of their personal being. So it's very important. The first step is setting up an LLC, for instance. The next step is making sure when you're operating that LLC that you're keeping the bank accounts separate, that you're coordinating with whoever is handling your money, whether it's you, a bookkeeper, a CPA, to make sure as you're distributing money out of that LLC to pay yourself or, to distribute profits, that it's going in the right way to keep everything separate. Because if you start, people write checks to you personally, you deposit them in the business account, you're not keeping things separate. That overlap ends up looking like, it's not really a separate thing. It's just an extension of yourself. And that's what gives, corporate litigation lawyers the in to say, if something goes wrong in your business, this isn't really a separate business. This is, just the person operating, and they can still go after you. So that's what piercing the veil is. You want to use the bubble of the LLC or use the box to really sort of close off any ability of anybody to argue that.
Yeah. No, I definitely I'm right there with you, because a lot of people don't think of worst case scenario, and worst case scenario could be that a minor accident happens, but there's a lot of medical bills and the insurance policy for that corporation isn't covering enough. And then they start going after, future wages, homes, you never know.
Sure. I can tell you, as somebody who's done litigation for forever and now on the business side, if somebody is coming after you because they've been injured or there's been some wrong done or they've suffered damages, their lawyer, rightfully so, to their benefit, is going to be looking at everything, every possible pocket that's there. They're going to be looking at insurance policies, corporate accounts. If they can come after you personally, they're going to. So anything you can do to make sure that you've at least got an argument to say, whoa, before we get into that personal stuff, this is, we get to stop there. And truthfully, you had mentioned taxes. The two parts of setting up really liability mitigation and then the tax benefits. Some people are nervous when they've got a sole proprietorship and everything is really easy to set up, a corporation or an LLC and say, well, now I've got to file a partnership return, or I've got to pay this flat corporate tax or something that's not going to benefit me. And I can tell you, there's obviously a lot of different scenarios for different people and what exactly you've got going on. But for the most part, I think if there's CPAs listening, they would agree that if you're a sole proprietor or you're a very small business and you own all of it, there are very many instances where setting up an LLC won't change your tax status. It becomes a pass-through. You don't have to file a separate return. So you can, if you're worried about it changing or paying more taxes or something like that, oftentimes you can come in and mitigate that risk, but also, either benefit on the tax side or not change anything.
Yeah, that's some good advice from an attorney. He's not a CPA, but I think
definitely not a CPA. No, I tell people all the time. I go, nope, you got to ask your CPA that question. My favorite words are, I'll defer to your CPA.
See, my favorite words are, I'll defer to your attorney. So
right, we're all in the business of deferring. That's exactly. Yeah. And when I got people setting up businesses and they say, hey, can I get an insurance policy for this? I go, no, you're gonna have to talk to your insurance agent.
Yeah. So it sounds like the importance of setting up a solid foundation. It is very important. What are some, are there contracts or steps that you could take, or documents you can use, I don't know, to-do lists that you advise clients on taking initially to protect themselves in the long run?
Sure. Even just in the formational stage, if you were to go to something, I've got clients who've gone to LegalZoom or some other sort of do-it-yourself site where you can set up an LLC. You'll end up with the LLC formed. What you may not end up with are the other documents that a lawyer like me would produce that show the equity breakdown, the operating agreement that limits the liability between the two partners if you've got a multi-member partnership. Some of those things, the customizability of a buy-sell agreement between partners in a business. What happens if one of them steps out in the street and gets hit by a bus? Those kind of things aren't going to happen if you're just grabbing some boilerplate off the internet. It's not going to be somebody sitting down and saying, what are you particularly concerned with? And how do we mitigate the things that you're particularly concerned with your business and your relationship with your business partners? And so I would say, generally speaking, if you've got real estate involved, if you've got a business or something, you want to have leases. Even if you're owning the property and the business is using it, you want to have something there to show that relationship. If you've got multiple equity holders or partners in a business, you want to have discussed with the partners and put down on paper what happens if they die, what happens if they get a divorce, what happens if somebody wants to sell out of the business, what rights does the person who's being left behind have to buy out, rights of first refusal, all that kind of stuff, so that everybody, when they're setting up businesses and they're getting started, they all like each other usually. Right. I guess there are exceptions, but yeah, they're getting along, they're liking each other, they're all headed in the same direction. And so one of my jobs is to say, okay, you're headed in the same direction now. What happens when you're not? We need to have something in place that helps to dictate how decisions are made when you can't decide, how one of you exits the business if you both decide this is not a good partnership going forward, in a way that's equitable to everybody. So those kind of things that sometimes business owners aren't thinking about early on are my job to point out and say, all right, great, you've got this entity and you can open up a bank account. Now let's talk about the long game. So that would be some suggestions on things to discuss early on.
Yeah, I like that. I find that a lot of the conversations I have to have with clients, especially with new businesses, is proving my value as a professional service, and you just kind of placed it there. But the fact that most new businesses don't know what they don't know, and someone like you who has experience dealing with the issues and has connections with your law firm with other people who have dealt with issues, you've seen things. Or you've done the research of other things that have happened. And so you're more prepared and unemotional in that preparation for the what if, right? And I live in the what if world, right? That's what I sell is, what if this happened? We want to make sure you're protected. And I think that's part of what you're doing with some of these small businesses too, is opening their eyes to 10 years from now, you might not want to be partners anymore. And you're not thinking of that now, and you shouldn't, but let me do that so that you're prepared if and when that ever happens. So I like that.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And the way I typically structure, I mean, every now and then I have somebody come to me and say, I'm starting a business with my, my business partner. I want you to represent me individually as we negotiate these things. And obviously I can do that. The situation that is more typical is representing the company. So the business partner or the business partners come in and say, here's what we want to do. My representation of the business puts me in a position where I'm not looking out for the interests of one over the other. I'm looking out for the interests of the business and of the people who own the business, so that I can say, okay, guys, I'm not trying to draft documents that puts one person in a position where they can take advantage of the other or anything like that. So the advice that I'm giving is, here is a way that is equitable to everybody, or here's what I would advise you do from a company standpoint. And then the business owners obviously can make whatever decision they want. And I can tell somebody like, well, you understand that means that if somebody wants to leave, then the other person gets to buy out at 50% of fair market value. Are you sure that's what you want to do? Are you guys sure of that? And they can make whatever decision they want. So, and also, I mean, I've been doing business work for a long time. I've been doing litigation for even longer. And so I think my background in litigation, particularly, there's other business attorneys in our firm that have backgrounds in, tax and finance and engineering and all that. But my background in litigation particularly leads me to look at things from like you do, what happens when everything goes wrong? If we're looking at, okay, this relationship falls apart, you end up in court. What kind of documents do we need to have in place, and how do they need to be executed so that these documents will hold up in court for one party or the other to enforce them? What do we need? What kind of structure do we need to put in place so that you've got a regular routine of keeping corporate minutes, of documenting the decisions you're making, so that if you end up in a position where either something goes really bad and you're in court, or really good and somebody's buying you out, right, you've got the record of documents to say, here's exactly what we've done and how we've done it.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point that you just said right there. I always go to the worst case scenario because that's what I want to protect. But like you said, if you're trying to sell your business, you also want to be set up correctly. There's more value in that sale. There's more, it'll ease that transition if the succession plan is to be bought out.
Sure. I mean, if the long-term goal, I mean, some people's long-term goal is to work the business, to create income, to retire, and the business, I'm going to give the business to my kids or something like that, and that's perfectly great. So a lot of times the objective is to build a business that then gets acquired by somebody or becomes a target for somebody to purchase. And the first question, I mean, I represent people on the buyer and seller sides of those transactions. And the first question that the seller or the buyer is going to ask is, all right, let me see your corporate book. Let me make sure that there's a ledger showing the equity interests, and I don't have to worry about buying a business for however much money I'm paying. And then 6 months from now, somebody, sends me an email and says, hey, by the way, I got 20% of this business 5 years ago. You want to have all that stuff put together for the good and the bad.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of good and bad, I want to transition a little bit into, contemporary issues that we're dealing with the quarantine and the COVID-19. A lot of businesses are, getting creative and pivoting, and some businesses are really struggling right now. And I know you and your firm are doing a lot of positive things to help the small businesses in the area. So maybe let's start with some of the things that you're initially doing, and we get into maybe some things that some businesses can be doing. So what are you doing at Vanwinkle?
Sure. Yeah. So right from the very beginning, when all of the sort of law changes started percolating, starting with some of the unemployment changes and, the extension of the Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA, right from the beginning, what we started doing was drafting client alerts, memos that we could send out to people, to our sort of business client base with updates, so that they don't have to sit down and read the FMLA, because nobody wants to do that.
Right.
So they could read it and know, okay, here's at the beginning, here's the proposed change. Here's what you need to be prepared for when the bill gets passed. Here's what actually has changed. Here's the reality for business owners. We started sending those out. I mean, I think early on, mid-March, those were probably going out once or twice a day. We were sending things out to business owners and getting a lot of really positive feedback saying, thank you so much for keeping us on top of this. And it's not just clients. I mean, we're sending it out to anybody who wants to be, on the front line of knowing what's going on. I think yesterday I sent out a memo to my mailing list that was, SBA issued some new guidance on the PPP loans for this second round of funding that they're putting through. And so people who didn't get those loans on the front end now are just desperate for whatever information they can get a hold of about how's it going to be different, how are they dealing with people like the Shake Shack and the Ruth Chris and all that's going on. So and some of it's clients, some of it's non-client business owners, some of it is financial professionals, other people that deal with businesses and business owners. So that's how we started, was sending out those memos. I'd invite anybody who's listening, reach out to me. I'm sure we'll do some contact information, but feel free to reach out. And if you want to be part of that, whether you're a client or not, our job is to make sure the businesses in Hendersonville, Henderson County, Buncombe County have the information they need to make the best decisions they can, because sometimes those decisions have to be made in a matter of hours sometimes.
Right.
So the more information we can give, the better.
That's great. That sounds really great. So from the insurance side, obviously we got hit with business interruption, and that's still a thing. I think Wolfgang Puck came out this week. So whenever you're listening to this, it was the week Wolfgang Puck came out against the insurance industry, which, however that ends, me personally, I look at it as, I'm not an adjuster. I'm not a licensed adjuster. I'm a licensed insurance agent. So I'm here to protect you in the best way I can up front. Let the adjuster see where the chips fall. But that is going to be an interesting fight between the restaurant industry and the insurance industry lobbyists on a national level that will eventually trickle down. But what I've seen, so that's what's been talked about a lot. But what I see in actual businesses is employment liability. So employment practices liability insurance is what we sell, the EPLI. Are you seeing anything come out of this where employers are doing right things or maybe doing the wrong things as far as handling their employees during this time?
Yes. Fortunately, so far, most of my clients that have contacted me with those specific employment issues are calling me first, which is obviously what we would prefer. They're calling me and saying, I know what my runway is. I know what I can handle. How do I handle hours reductions, pay reductions, furloughs, terminations? How do I do this in a way that is compliant? The general answer is business owners oftentimes have a lot more freedom to do what they need to do to make the bottom line work in circumstances like this. North Carolina is an at-will state, so there's not a lot of prohibitions as long as you're not terminating people or treating people differently because of a protected class, race, sex, gender, all that. But generally speaking, the employers have more power to do what they need to do than they think. But my job is to, give them the advice, based on their specific circumstances. Here's what I think your options are. And obviously warn them about, if I think something that they're doing either is or might appear to be motivated by something else or being done in a way that's going to create that liability, to let them know, hey, I really think you need to rethink what you're doing or do this in a different way so that it's not, targeted in a way that could open up your business to issues.
Yeah, I spoke to one of my clients and advised him to contact his attorney because he had let go his whole front of house staff, which was all females, and kept his back of house staff, which was all males. And so I know that was not his intent. He knows that's not his intent. Most likely his staff knows that's not his intent, but the perception, you never know, right? So that's one of those, like, get a hold of somebody that, and I'd advise him, like, contact your attorney, contact your, he actually has an HR department that he uses for hiring. So I was like, should have contacted them when firing, but yeah, so those things happen without the intent necessarily being that's what you're doing.
Sure. And that's, again, what I look at is from a claimant standpoint. I go, so what is the exposure, the liability exposure that you have if something happens? You're not inherently liable for something, if in the instance of your client, unless one of those terminated employees decides that it's a problem, it's not a problem. But when they do, then, they're again going to be looking at, the business, the insurance policies, what is in place now that I can go after to try to make me whole for what I say is what I perceive to be a wrong that the business has done. Now, I also tell my clients, litigation doesn't guarantee a loss. It's not
Right.
like, there is still a burden of proof that has to be put forward to say this was the intent or this is what was done, and this is how we were wrong and they're responsible. But even that, I mean, you can't stop somebody from suing you, and it's still going to be, getting a lawyer like me involved, the energy, the effort. And if you can avoid it, even if it's a baseless claim that somebody's going to bring against you and you're confident you're going to win, it's always better to stay out of court. From a business side, particularly, businesses now where conserving capital is really important. I mean, it's really important to not have just sort of, your capital just going out left and right. It's already going out left and right for things that you have to pay for. I mean, I would love for businesses to be paying me, but there are often times where their money is better spent other places than paying their lawyer. So if they can get, 30 minutes worth of advice for me that saves them 30 hours worth of legal fees in the future, that's always a better outcome for a client.
Yeah, without a doubt. I agree. Well, Anderson, I want to move on to the next section. I always ask every guest 3 questions, so we're going to move into that. The first question is, what is the most influential book you've read in the last 6 months?
Ooh, well, I won't bore you with like a trade publication or something. I mean,
Yeah.
the most influential thing I've read in the last 6 months is probably the CARES Act, which is not, as sexy of an answer as some other guests on your show might be answering. I think it is, but maybe I will go with that because I think it's particularly relevant right now that
Without a doubt.
That people, particularly my clients, know that, they've got lawyers who are up on and have read what's coming out. I'm pretty sure most of the lawmakers who signed it didn't read it.
Yeah.
So, that's probably the most influential thing I've read. On the spot. I'll go with that one for now. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great
Okay.
contemporary answer that applies. But I hear you, man. I geek out on reading insurance policy, so I feel you on that.
Yeah. That's why, there's something for everybody. Our clients don't want to read their insurance policies. They don't want to read the laws and stuff like that. So they call us and say, tell me what this says in plain English. And
tell me the story that really applies to this, not the legal jargon that you're reading. All right. So
exactly.
what is something that you've had to say no to in the last 6 months?
Something I've had to say no to in the last 6 months. Ooh, these are good questions. I like that you didn't prepare me for these questions ahead of time either, because you're really putting me on it. Again, just because, we're all so up to our eyeballs in what's going on now. I mean, I think probably some of the most striking things I've had to say no to in the last 6 months. I mean, this is going to be a really contemporary example, but I said no to my family getting together for Easter. I mean, that's that's killer. I mean, it's killer to have something like that where you go, this is something that everybody wants to do. You make compromises. My wife and I drove my daughter over to my parents' house so they could see her in her Easter dress. But you just got to say this right now is more important to care about than as much as I would love to have gotten together with my family and sat down for Easter dinner. It's just right now we got to make those decisions. So that's sort of a drag answer to give, but it's definitely one of the harder no's that I've had to say in a long time.
No, I think I think everybody feels that, and leaders lead, right? So you had to make a tough decision, but it's true to character, and you gotta think of the bigger picture and things like that than just the joy of Easter supper. So I appreciate that answer.
In my family's defense, it's not like I had family members beating on me saying everybody else is getting together and you guys aren't. I mean, we're pretty responsible, and I've got my father's a physician, so it was a hard no because everybody kind of had to come to the same realization at the same time.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right. One more question. If
Okay.
I gave you a billboard and you could put whatever you wanted on it, right? So words. So you could say anything you wanted on this billboard. Millions and millions of people are going to see it. What would you put on that billboard?
So from a millions and millions of people. So from a professional side, I would say, something to the extent of, Vanwinkle as a firm and myself particularly as an attorney, providing, high level business legal services that some people think you can only get in Charlotte or Raleigh or Atlanta or New York. But we're doing huge transactions, millions and millions and millions of dollars of transactions that I don't think a lot of business owners realize, and also think, well, but if they're handling a $65 million business transaction, they don't have time for my little, 2-employee thing, which is just not the case. I mean, we're here for businesses. We're here for businesses of all sizes, and we can do everything that you need us to do. So that, from a professional side, I would put something like that, because I think there's, sometimes people don't give Hendersonville, Henderson County, or people that are sort of in smaller places the credit for being just as professional and capable as people in other places. We don't all have to go to Charlotte to be really good at our jobs. But from a personal side, again, timely. But I mean, I'd say right now, I think that the most important thing that if I could say to like millions of people at one time would be, we got to take care of each other. I mean, we have to take care of each other. We have to look out for each other, whether that's staying at home or calling friends that you haven't talked to in a long time, or going grocery shopping for somebody who can't go. I mean, we've just got to, or giving legal advice to people who are struggling, trying to get a PPP loan and not charging them for it. I mean, that kind of stuff is, everybody needs to be in the same boat of saying, we are all doing this together. Whatever you can do to help the person next to you, you should be willing and ready to do it. And remember that when this is over. I mean, when it's over, remember the people that were there for you when things were darker. Remember the medical professionals that were still working even though they were getting sick. I mean, remember everything that was good in the time that was bad, so that we don't end up in the same position again. I think that's what I would put.
Well, thanks for sharing your heart. Very thankful to have you on, Anderson. How can people get a hold of you?
All right. So you can call our office number here in Hendersonville, 828-697-6196. You can go on our website, is vwlawfirm.com. I have an email address. Anybody's welcome to reach out to me. It's my first initial and my last name, Aellis at vwlawfirm.com. And then because we didn't want to inundate everybody with emails like we were early on in March, we've actually set up a business Twitter that posts a lot of the things that we used to send out in these client alerts. I think it's at VW_business. So if you search for like VW, like Volkswagen, but Vanwinkle, VW business on Twitter, you'll get us. We're posting SBA alerts and client alerts and law updates and then local community stuff. I mean, our businesses in Hendersonville, connect with our Twitter and tell us what's going on with your business, and we'll share it out to other people who are in the same boat.
Excellent. Appreciate all you do, Anderson. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Jared. Thanks for doing this. Keep up the good work.
Thank you for watching the Jared Bellmund Show. Be sure to hit subscribe, ring the bell for future notifications, and check out the description for more information.